everybody. Ross Hill here, Director of Intelligence for At Risk's Global Risk Intelligence team, and welcome to the latest edition of our weekly briefing Insights. This week, we'll obviously continue tracking the conflict in Ukraine, where fighting has reached the centre of Mariupol. Some reports we're seeing saying that around 90% of the buildings in the city have some kind of damage, but Russia has not actually managed to take control of that city. Otherwise, we continue to see fighting focused in the same areas as over the last week or so. So in the south and the east, and then some areas of the north, and then Russian forces also making slow progress towards Kiev as well. But we're not seeing any significant Russian gains being reported. Actually seeing some reports that Russia is digging into positions around Kiev, and that suggests that they might be getting ready for some kind of more prolonged conflict. We're also seeing reports that Russia's continuing to suffer quite heavy losses, although Ukraine, I think, is reporting that Russia may have lost about 14,000 troops. Western intelligence suggests that it is a bit less than that, maybe around 7,000, but they're definitely losing a lot of personnel and a lot of equipment. And also, most concerningly, probably for Russia, the number of senior military commanders being killed. Because of that, we're seeing further reports that Russia is resorting to deploy mercenaries from Libya and maybe elsewhere in the Middle East, as well as also using more domestic mobilization measures to bring in reinforcements. We're still seeing some calls for negotiations. Zelensky, Ukraine's president, calling for meaningful and fair negotiations with Russia. And Putin had a call with Turkey last week that is involved in some mediation efforts, with Vladimir Putin outlining his four conditions. The first one is Ukraine's neutrality, so continuing with the demand that Ukraine doesn't join NATO, and also, I think, looking for Ukraine to stop receiving weapons from Western allies or NATO allies. We're also seeing Putin call for the protection of the Russian language. That's quite interesting. Putin considers anyone that speaks Russian as being Russian. And I think that was actually part of the negotiations back in 2014 after the conflict around Crimea. That would actually be pretty easy for Ukraine to bring in, I think. Then Putin talking about denazification. That's a bit of an unusual one in a sense. Russia used the pretext of Ukraine's government being full of Nazis and oppressing its own people as a pretext, or at least one of the pretexts for its invasion. But there's no real sort of substantial evidence that that's going on. However, anything like this involved in negotiations would probably require Ukraine to kind of crack down on any far right or nationalist groups that are operating in the country. And then the last one, possibly the most difficult one, asking Ukraine to cede some of the territory, probably officially recognizing Crimea as part of Russia and maybe giving up relatively large parts of the east and the southeast of the country, which would be very difficult for Ukraine to do at this point. So not sure how well negotiations are really going, although Turkey claiming that progress is being made. But the main concern we have is that Russia is really just using negotiations as some kind of stalling tactic, allowing them to regroup and carry on with the conflict. Our next item, we're going to take a look at the truckers or convoy protests that are currently ongoing in Washington, D.C. in the US.
Thanks, Ross. The People's Convoy began their 17th day of protests since arriving at the Hagerstown Speedway on March 4th. Although COVID-related restrictions are lifting around the country, protesters are still calling for an end to the few COVID mandates that remain, including the national emergency order, the ongoing mask mandate for airplane and train passengers, and vaccine requirements for the military. Their key demands have broadened, however, and now include reopening the Keystone Pipeline, ending big tech censorship, ensuring rights for those charged with crimes related to the Capitol riots on Jan 6, holding vaccine manufacturers liable for damages, and reaffirming the Bill of Rights. Currently, the convoy consists of about 100 trucks, and they're also being supported by many additional cars, pickup trucks, and personal vans. At first, the trucker protest kept to running laps around the DC Beltway. However, last week, the convoy made trips into DC proper. Initially, convoy organizers avoided causing major traffic problems, but since having entered the city and having created serious traffic slowdowns, this was likely an attempt to make a larger impression. In response, police have temporarily closed freeway exits to prevent the convoy from entering the city. And most recently, a weekend trip into the city saw the convoy being held up by a single bicyclist. There's video of that on the internet. What this all kind of means for those living in the area, they should expect heavy traffic delays to continue, and especially when authorities set up additional temporary road closures. The demands of the People's Convoy continue to shift and broaden. This is likely to encourage protesters to continue their efforts. It may also be enough to motivate others to join. However, it is unlikely that the overall size will grow substantially. Rather, new people entering the protests and are likely to kind of maintain a consistent number that is likely to continue to receive notice in the media. Lastly, the convoy protests continue to draw more and more support from people and groups on the far right. Far right representation currently includes the Three Percenters and the Proud Boys. These groups have been heard calling for a citizen's arrest of President Biden and Vice President Harris. Additionally, QAnon propaganda and misinformation is widely present at the convoy. Ross?
Thanks, Roman. Really appreciate the update. That's it from us this week. Hope you found the briefing useful and hope you'll continue to listen.